Hello everybody, James here. I'm back from my jaunt and I had to wake up pretty early this morning, leave, didn't check the news, and then on the way back, checked the news on my phone and found that Stephanie McMahon had resigned. Now I'm recording this at 1:30 local time, so this news has been out for a good few hours, ago anyway, 11, 12 hours. And so Stephanie McMahon has resigned. I'm going to just read this little thing for you, and then we're going to get on to what if Vince McMahon sells to the Saudis. So just very quickly, here we go. Dear WWE Universe, about 8 months ago, I took a leave of absence. Now, the leave of absence is interesting enough as it is because she took a leave of absence. That was her decision. But then the company buried her publicly to Business Insider, saying that she wasn't doing well enough in her role as chief branding officer as far as selling advertising and sponsorships to WWE. Anyway, as we go on, I had the privilege to return as the co-CEO along with Nick Khan and chairwoman of the board of WWE. And a little further down, strongest of executives and Nick Khan, our founder Vince McMahon, has returned as executive chair and is leading an exciting process regarding strategic alternatives, blah, 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 blah. So essentially, Stephanie McMahon is out. She announces her resignation, and then just a few minutes later, Vince McMahon, or WWE corporate.wwe.com, announced that Vince McMahon, here we go, has today announced that its board of directors unanimously elected Vince McMahon executive chairman of the board. Very interesting it is that they say unanimously, because on December 27th, the WWE board of directors held a vote and they unanimously voted against Vince McMahon returning to the company. Anyway, let's go back. Stephanie McMahon has resigned from her roles as chairwoman and co-CEO. I don't know if that means if she's left the board of directors as well. It could possibly be, but last time when she left, I don't think she did leave the board, so maybe she's still on the board. Vince says, first, I'd like to express my full support for Stephanie's personal decision. I'll be forever grateful, blah, 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 blah. I'm proud to announce that Nick Khan will serve as WWE CEO on his own. Stephanie says how proud she is. Nick Khan, terrific executive. Stephanie McMahon was, all that kind of thing. Anyway, this video isn't about the resignation. This is about Vince McMahon returning and what happens if he sells to the Saudis and on who else he could sell it to as well. Now, I was writing all these notes down for actually a special that we're doing with Dutch Mantel over at Storytime with Dutch Mantel, the YouTube channel. You can't miss it. Just search Dutch Mantel YouTube. Christ, you'll find it. Anyway, just very briefly beforehand, I am going to give you the most salient information that Vince McMahon was writing back and forth to WWE a couple of times about him returning. The board said it wasn't a good idea with pending legal issues with non-disclosure agreements and various untoward relationships going to straight-out sexual assault. And also, there is also more to come, apparently, according to the board, that they have not released this information yet, or they haven't released the information, but maybe someone within board might release it anonymously. But there is more allegations coming towards Vince. Anyway, the point is that McMahon played his trump card, so to speak, and he said that he'd pay money for the NDAs that wasn't covered by insurance, but then also in the same email, he wrote, I would like to be clear that unless I have direct involvement and input as executive chairman from the outset, I will not be able to support or approve any media rights deals or strategic transition. Now, strategic transition means selling the company. Also today, it has been said that one of the leaders, one of the most biggest potential buyers is the Saudis, the Crown Prince, and blah, blah, blah. All those guys, they've been in bed with the Saudis since, 2018? Just before I talk about the Saudi Arabia potential deal, the stock has been up since Vince left. But now, since Vince has returned, and they're talking about selling the company, $70.94 on January 5th, that jumped up to $85.36 a day later, and today the stock is currently trading around $89. And Entertainment Weekly has speculated that if WWE were to sell, the price could be around $8.5 million. Now, if they sold at that price, McMahon, with all his shares, would probably see something like $3 billion in his bank account when the company has sold. So, Saudi Arabia is going to be the top potential buyer, and Vince McMahon has been in contact with the Saudis before he actually wrote to WWE, I believe, about a potential purchase. Before we get to the Saudis, I'm going to name some other people and other companies that have been brought up as potential buyers. The Rock and Nick Khan, they're great friends. Nick Khan is CEO. The Rock, Nick Khan, between them, I'm sure could get up a bunch of venture capitalists together and come up with the money. That might be, from a creative standpoint, the best thing to happen for WWE, for the fans. Other big media conglomerates, like Viacom, Disney, Comcast, etc., they could avoid the $465 million per year rights fees for Raw and SmackDown, and that's for the rights fees negotiated in 2019, not the ones that are going to be negotiated in 2024, which could be even higher. So it could be 500 million, could be 600 million, who knows. So that'd be a heck of an amount of money to save themselves, and also they'd earn money on sales, selling the rights to other countries as well. So they would actually, just on the rights, save themselves a lot of money and make a lot of money, as well as everything else that goes with it. There's over-the-top subscription services like Netflix and Prime and NBC Universal, who has Peacock and also owns the USA Network, another money-saving venture in the long run. And WWE and USA Network have had a relationship going back 39 years or 40 years. I can't remember when All American came out. I think it might have been 84. But anyway, 39 or 40 years. Another name that's come up quite a few times is Endeavor. Now, Endeavor is the company that owns UFC. And Endeavor also, so the UFC also happens to be Endeavor's only really profitable company. So, and as far as a business goes, UFC's about as close to WWE as anything else is, especially in sporting terms or entertainment terms or fighting terms. So they've probably been relatively safe hands with Endeavor. And also, this will probably appeal to Vince McMahon, because when they bought UFC in 2016, they fired a load of people, rejigged a load of people. I think they changed the booker, but they kept Dana White on, who was the president and also the face of UFC. And apparently they're still keeping him after that slapping incident with his wife, whatever you think about that. And it's probably good for Vince McMahon that if they're going to keep Dana White on, then Vince McMahon may end up being kept on as a public face, and then, or who knows how much autonomy he'd have in the company. Maybe he'd wheedle his way back into creative, which seems to be, at least in my opinion, something that's quite likely to happen eventually, because Vince can't sort of keep his hands to himself in creative and maybe other things as well. The only other major investors in WWE stock, they're all hedge fund managers, like mutual funds, that kind of thing. Like the Vanguard Group, BlackRock Fund Advisors, 91 UK, American Century Investments. I doubt any of those are going to club together to buy the company. Which leads us then to Saudi Arabia. Now, apparently Saudi Arabia has something like $620 billion that they could invest. They've got a huge amount of money, and they're more than interested in taking on American sports companies to get into sport, sort of get the propaganda out there that, hey, Saudi Arabia is not that backwards and, non-progressive and that kind of thing, like they do with all the Saudi Arabia shows. They've got that propaganda out there, and who knows how that would sort of like seep into WWE programming should they buy it. But that's not the point. Anyway, one thing, Saudis don't, or the people in charge there, don't really seem to know much about current WWE product at all. Apparently, at the original Saudi show, when they had like the Greatest Royal Rumble, they requested Yokozuna and the Ultimate Warrior to appear. So it doesn't seem like they're that on the ball with what's going on with WWE. So they maybe they're just buying it for the investment. But also, with Vince and Saudi Arabia, they seem to be quite in bed with each other. Vince has been talking with the Saudis for a while, apparently beforehand, as I said before. So they seem like the most likely purchasers. Another thing that would be good for at least Vince is that Saudis buying WWE would mean that the company would once again become private, and therefore they won't be bound by SEC rules like having to disclose figures and having to retire when certain allegations come out and non-disclosure agreements have been revealed and that kind of thing. Here's why it's a bad idea. Is look at what's happened with the Live Golf. and I expect the majority of you aren't big golf fans watching. I actually am a fairly big golf fan. They've bought a ton of names and lured them over from the PGA Tour to compete with the PGA Tour, bigger money, shorter rounds to try and make it more exciting for television product. And not one single major TV station or anything or anyone has bitten on it. No one shows Live Golf. At one point, I think they were showing it for free on YouTube. So if golf, which is, huge, is, what is it called, one of those premium sponsorship opportunity kind of sports, can't get on TV despite all these recognizable names, like Sergio Garcia, there's one just off the top of my head, who's gone over, huge other names have gone over, and they still can't get a TV deal. That just shows you how poisonous being associated with Saudi Arabia is. And what would happen with WWE if it was owned by the Saudis? Well, one thing that could well happen is sponsorship dropouts who don't want to be associated with that country. Another thing is like companies like Mattel, which is like the premier or one of the premier merchandisers out there. I'm not so sure that they'd be so keen on being associated with Saudi Arabia, and they may withdraw support from the company, and then they'd have to go back to whoever it was who sort of needs the money more, I suppose. And what about fan boycotts as well? I mean, there's been fans have said, oh, I'm going to boycott if this happens or that happens or blah, 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 and it never really seems to happen. But with the Saudis buying it, would fans boycott it? It seems like a huge poison chalice, really, to me, to sell the company to them, because I cannot imagine any real upside for anyone, not the fans, because of the people who are apparently interested in wrestling and owning the company don't really seem to know that much about the product. And the only real benefit is to have Vince sort of have a guaranteed job for the rest of his life. Other than that, I can't see any bonus to it. I mean, will rights fees go down because there's less of a bidding war? It's things like that that make me think, well, the Saudi Arabians buying it would just be a sort of terrible idea. And if Vince is going to sell it, the best people he could probably sell it to that's a tough one. NBC, I'd say. Endeavor, I'd say. Or even The Rock and Nick Khan. I think those would be the best things to do if the company is going to be sold. We don't know that for certain, but at the moment it's looking like Saudi Arabia is top of the list. And the problem is that there's a load of questions and not really many answers. I'll be talking about this with Dutch on the Storytime with Dutch Mantel YouTube channel and podcast. That'll be coming out later today, in fact, because it's a sort of a breaking news kind of thing. But for now, I'll leave you to it. Those are my thoughts on it. And, actually, one more thing is another reason that the Saudi Arabia deal, if they buy WWE, might not be a great idea. It's also, how's it going to affect certain talents, like Sami Zayn, for example, who won't go, or is either banned or won't go, depending on the source, to Saudi Arabia. Well, they insist that he's fired. He's basically the MVP of SmackDown at the moment, so what's going to happen to him? What's going to happen to Kevin Owens, who also won't go to Saudi Arabia, probably in a league with Sami Zayn, with sympathy to Sami Zayn. John Cena wouldn't go to Saudi Arabia, and he's doing, a few matches here and there, a couple of times a year or once a year at the moment, but probably more in the future, hopefully. What about people like The Rock? What about Steve Austin, who maybe doesn't have a Hollywood career anymore because he doesn't? But The Rock certainly does, and it'd be a bad look for him, I imagine. And here's another question. What would happen to women's wrestling in 2023 later on if the Saudis buy it? I mean, will they insist that they cover up more? Will they insist that there are less women on American TV? Who knows? Who really, really knows? The only thing we know is that, for sure, is Stephanie's gone, and Shane McMahon has no stock left. I thought I'd just throw that in there. I only just learned this today, so I thought I'd mention it, is that I found out, somehow this one passed me by, is that when Shane left, or was fired basically after the Royal Rumble in 2022, so just about a year ago, was that he was pitching himself to be not only the number one entrant, but also going toe-to-toe with Brock Lesnar. So even though the fact he's nearly 50 and sort of like gets exhausted immediately. Other questions that we can ask is what's going to happen to Triple H, what's going to happen to Kevin Dunn, what's going to happen to Nick Khan in the future, what's going to happen to most of the wrestlers, is there going to be huge downsizing in the office, is there going to be huge downsizing of the roster, how's this going to affect AEW? Who can say for now, but for now, I've rambled on for nearly 15 minutes, so thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you when it's announced that WWE has been sold.